For maximum picture quality, it may be necessary to adjust the tracking control on your VCR.
Female Country Vocalist of the Year, Michelle Wright, stars in Michelle. Saturday at 8 p.m., 9 Atlantic. Babe.
Canadian Tire is celebrating its 70th anniversary. Schinker's Home Improvement Center is also celebrating its 70th anniversary. Let's compare. Canadian Tire's having a sale this week on products for around the home with great deals on Energy Choice light bulbs. They last much longer and can save up to 80% in energy costs. Choose from soft white bulbs starting at $1.49 to compact fluorescents starting at $10.99. Down at Schinker's, they'll be grilling up bratwurst all day Sunday.
Did I tell you they glued my Bible together?
Where anyone and anything is a target.
What's next? Whoopee cushions on the wheelchairs?
All this week on MASH. Franks for the memories.
All this week on MASH, weeknights at 7.
More cuts announced by a Heinsberg cheese manufacturer at 11.
Prime Time with anchors Diane Sawyer in New York, Sam Donaldson in Washington, and Chief Correspondent Chris Wallace.
Tonight, new questions about the LAPD investigation of O.J. Simpson, as Mark Fuhrman talks for the first time about the evidence.
Fingerprint was in blood. It was a good fingerprint.
Crucial evidence, perhaps decisive evidence, he says was there at the crime scene and missed.
You think that could have been
the end of the case?
And something even more startling. Did the LAPD overlook a clue to the murder weapon? Is that a knife box in Simpson's bathroom?
You're talking about a knife this size, right?
Primetime calls in the experts who say Mark Fuhrman may just be right. And also, for the first time tonight, a new witness speaks out. Did the prosecutors hide him?
Did Marcia Clark and Chris Darden blow the case? Or did you?
It's the most prescribed drug in America. But should you take it for the rest of your life?
To me, the benefits outweigh anything negative.
Now, a leading women's health expert says women who take estrogen may be putting themselves at increased risk.
It's an experiment. We don't know yet what the long-term effects of taking these hormones are.
Is it just marketing or good medicine? Tonight, Dr. Nancy Snyderman takes a hard look.
This notion that we have to put everybody on drugs for the next 30 years, there's something crazy about that.
What do Alistair Cook, supermodel Kim Alexis, and Mayflower Madam Sidney Biddle Barrows have in common? They've all lived the lifestyles of the rich and famous at bargain rates. Is this a type of welfare for the wealthy? Tonight, a view from the top as John Stossel brings his unique point of view to Primetime.
Hello? From ABC News, Primetime will continue after this brief message.
Somewhere between silver and white is a color called chrome. One of the colors between the colors created by Canon Laser Color. Canon Laser Color, its only competition is reality.
Did you know now Fresh Step Scoop fights ammonia odor better?
Wow!
Now Fresh Step Scoop has special ammonia neutralizers for better ammonia odor control. New Fresh Step Scoop, fresher with every step.
This is my office. my phone, my calendar, and where I was supposed to be 10 minutes ago. I need relief. Ah, my Lincoln Town Car. Just what the doctor ordered. Its soothing comfort goes to work immediately, delivering a feeling of unsurpassed luxury and peace of mind. You know, I'm amazed a car like this is available without a prescription.
Tomorrow, plastic surgery. It's not just for Hollywood stars. You too can get the look you want at a price you can afford.
Good Morning America.
ABC tomorrow.
An event so special it could only be on ABC. When you're friends with the biggest stars, you can expect some party. Happy birthday, Elizabeth. Monday on ABC.
Drop it or I'll shoot.
Drop the shoelace and I'll drop the bottle.
Drop the bottle and I'll drop the gun.
Oh, both of you drop everything.
Premieres 1 week from Monday.
Spy game.
Wanna play?
Tomorrow, here's another way your kids could improve their grades right now. The ideas just keep coming on ABC's World News Tonight with Peter Jennings.
You said that you loved being a cop.
Still do.
Still would.
No, I still do. I still remember.
Miss it already?
Always did. I miss it on the weekends. It eats you up, but it gives it back.
Good evening. That was Mark Fuhrman 4.5 months ago at the end of a long interview right here on Primetime about racism, his perjury charge, and the ugly words he used over and over again on those tapes made with a screenwriter. Well, you may remember at that time, Fuhrman promised us he would come back once more to talk about the evidence. And even if you think there cannot possibly be anything new in the O.J. Simpson case, tonight Fuhrman may prove you wrong. He's going to tell you about stunning evidence that he says was missed, police work that seems more incompetent than anyone thought, and whatever you think of him as a human being, he argues, he was a serious cop, good at his job. Fuhrman has also written a book now which begins with these words about what he said on those explosive tapes.
All of us hide portions of our life that we hope would never be judged by our neighbors, let alone the world. An apology for the racial unrest I caused seems painfully inadequate. My immature, irresponsible ramblings with a screenwriter were never intended to be heard by anyone but the two of us. These words echo in my mind daily, and I am ashamed.
Mark Fuhrman at home in Sandpoint, Idaho, apologizing as he has before for what he said on those tapes, but insisting there's a lot more to the story he says he's waited so long to tell.
There's people that say that I was the cause of the criminal case to fail. I ate that for 2 years, sitting on all this information.
He says it starts with these notes, his list of evidence he documented at the Bundy crime scene hours after the murder. Right there, take a closer look at number 15. It's something we haven't really heard about before. The notes say he saw a visible fingerprint on the back gate leading out. He says it was in blood.
Fingerprint was in blood. It was a good fingerprint.
What do you mean, good fingerprint?
I mean, you could see it was a very crisp fingerprint in blood on a brass-plated turnstile lock on the gate.
You think that could have been, what is it?
The end of the case.
That would have done it.
Well, if it didn't, it sure would have been one whopper of an explanation how your fingerprint gets there in your blood or somebody else's blood at a murder scene. Had we just had a photograph of that fingerprint in blood, absent of being able to take the DNA that comprised the print, it still would have been identifiable.
From a photograph?
Oh, it was on brass. It was on polished brass.
But remember, early on, Fuhrman was told to turn the crime scene over to these two men, the unit for special cases, headed by Tom Lang and Phil Vanatter, senior homicide detectives who have been on a book tour of their own.
We examined that gate. We saw absolutely nothing.
Lang and Vanatter not only raise questions about whether that fingerprint ever existed, they write in their book, in effect, it's everybody's word against Fuhrman.
No such fingerprint was seen by anyone else. That's what they write.
Untrue. Brad Roberts saw the print.
I'm Brad Roberts. I'm a homicide detective for LAPD.
Detective Brad Roberts. You haven't heard from him before. He was Fuhrman's partner that night with him at Bundy and then at Simpson's house at Rockingham. Roberts is the only person in this debate still with the LAPD. So what does he know about that bloody fingerprint?
I think I saw it before he did, and I actually pointed it out to him.
And how good was it? How useful would it have been?
This case was probably over with. I mean, the killer signed his name with that fingerprint.
But if Lang and Vanatter missed seeing that signature themselves, could they have learned that it existed from Fuhrman's notes?
I was given Mark Fuhrman's notes that he had completed before my arrival.
That's Phil Vanatter on the stand. But if he had the notes, why didn't he focus on that bloody fingerprint?
I brought it up to Marcia Clark, and she told me, Mark, they never read your notes.
I mean, is this a game? You know, I'll put it in my notes and maybe you'll find it? It's ridiculous.
Lang and Vanatter say it's true. They didn't read the notes that day, but add,
a bloody fingerprint is everything to a crime scene. Bells should go off. People should start screaming up and down.
The best thing that any homicide detective can find in any crime scene is a bloody fingerprint. I mean, that's the ultimate.
Wouldn't you go immediately and say there's a fingerprint?
It would be almost against protocol to assume that these two veteran homicide detectives would not pick up on obvious evidence that were right in the notes. I've worked with a lot of people on the department, and I've had great partners, and I've never had anybody not read my notes.
Whatever the proper procedure, the fact is, there wasn't even a close-up photograph of the rear gate and handle. This is the only photo of the rear gate taken that day. And you'll remember criminalist Dennis Fung missed all the blood on the rear gate that day and didn't return to collect it until 20 days later. Fuhrman reminds us Lang and Vanatter were in charge.
That was a mistake. The criminalist should have collected that blood.
So what happened to the fingerprint?
It's gone.
The fingerprint is not the only evidence Fuhrman says Lang and Vanatter missed. Roberts found blood on the light switch in the maid's bathroom near the laundry at Simpson's house. Lang and Vanatter say blood on the light switch didn't exist.
Did you say anything to anyone about this?
Oh, sure. It was Richard Harrow and Jim Harper.
So we contacted Detective Harrow, who told us he does remember something about blood on a light switch, though it's been a long time. And how about the dark sweatsuit Roberts saw at Simpson's house in the washing machine? Would it have matched the blue-black cotton fibers on Ron Goldman's shirt? We'll never know, and Lang says he regrets he didn't book it as evidence.
Hindsight is great. 2020, we all wish we had it.
If you're still wondering whether Brad Roberts was really inside on all this, take a look. There's Roberts the day after the murder with Marcia Clark at Rockingham. He was also there when Simpson returned from Chicago and walked up his driveway toward the police.
O.J. was in a very fast stride, and he yelled out, "What are you guys doing here? You better not be screwing up my house."
Another police officer handcuffed Simpson, and when Simpson asked what was it all about, Roberts said there was a blood trail from Nicole's dead body to Simpson's house.
And he repeated it, going, "A blood trail?" And I said, "Yeah." And the man just started shaking.
Again, there's Roberts under the tree with Vanatter and Simpson.
He was hyperventilating. He started sweating. And he started repeatedly saying, "Oh, man. Oh, man."
Oh, man.
Fuhrman and Roberts say Simpson was so rattled it was a golden opportunity when later that day Lang and Vanatter took him in for his first debriefing.
O.J., what can you say about this? Back up, please.
Simpson had waived his right to have an attorney present, an opportunity Fuhrman says Lang and Vanatter bungled.
Never asked if he owned brown leather gloves. Never asked if he owned any other knives and what's in the kitchen. He was never asked if he's ever been behind Cato Kalin's bungalow. He wasn't asked his shoe size. Where are your clothes right now? Pin him down on that cut. And most importantly, they never asked if he killed his wife.
Well, he would have said no, presumably.
How do you know? we could have gotten so much information that there was absolutely no reason to get a confession.
Let's go through it. Take a look at some specifics here.
Fuhrman says on key points, like the Bronco, they didn't even try to pin Simpson's story down.
When did you last drive it?
Yesterday.
What time yesterday?
In the morning, in the afternoon.
Why don't we get some times here? There's only one person that can tell us where he cut himself and what he was doing between 10 and 11 o'clock.
Let's listen to the section on when he cut himself and how.
Simpson first cites Chicago.
I don't know. Not the first time. I know when I was in Chicago, I know I broke the glass. I just was, you had one of you guys that just called me, and I was in the bathroom, and I just kind of went bonkers for a little bit.
Is that how you cut it?
It was cut before, but I think I just opened it again. I'm not sure.
Fuhrman says Lang and Van Adder let Simpson switch stories by tipping their hand about blood, not in Chicago, in the Bronco back in L.A.
Do you recall bleeding at all in the truck in the Bronco?
I recall bleeding at my house, and then I went to the Bronco. The last thing I did before I left, when I was rushing, was went and got my phone out of the Bronco.
Do you recall bleeding at all?
Yeah, I mean, I knew I was bleeding, but it was no big deal. I bleed all the time. I mean,
O.J. Simpson made up how he bled in his Bronco right as he asked that question. You can hear it. He's thinking right then. He knows there's blood in the Bronco, and he's got to figure out how it got there. How do you cut yourself on a cellular phone, a flip phone?
But the interrogation of O.J. Simpson ends after only 32 minutes. Fuhrman says he's interrogated vandalism suspects longer than that.
I can just hear some people sitting at home saying, Mark Fuhrman, whose lie on the stand torpedoed this case, is criticizing Lang and Van Adder?
Well, I'm not the only one.
He points out that many others have called that interview a fiasco.
We could have done anything we wanted to. We made a decision. We stand by that decision. And that decision was used to convict him in the civil case.
They pinned them down to nothing.
And Fuhrman says before it was over, the disastrous detective work got even worse.
You're saying that that evidence that could have led to the murder weapon was there that night and missed?
That's what I'm saying.
When we come back, Mark Fuhrman tells of a startling discovery at Simpson's Rockingham estate.
I told detectives who were searching the master bedroom that there was a package, a knife box on the bathtub.
When Primetime continues.
Unwrap a smile to raise your spirits high.
Little Debbie, America's #1 snack cake. By the box or handy single pack.
I haven't felt this good for a while. Unwrap a smile.
How do you make a Best Buy better? Start with 88 by Oldsmobile. Well equipped at $23,100. Selected one of the best values of the year. 88 is the only full-size car to earn a Consumer's Digest Best Buy Award an unprecedented 7 years in a row. To celebrate, let's make it better. For a limited time, get an additional $1,000 cash savings on 88 by Oldsmobile. A Best Buy made better. See your local Oldsmobile retailer today.
The sun is rising, see it shine. A new day rising, see it shine.
It's a new day with new improved Transitions lenses. Outdoors, they get darker faster. Indoors, clearer. And Transitions lenses are thinner and more comfortable than regular glass or plastic lenses, so you feel and look better.
It's a new day.
It's a new day in eye care with Transitions lenses.
Does your skin feel a little dry? Quench it with the best Vaseline Intensive Care yet. Brimming with healing moisturizers and healthy skin complex, Vaseline Intensive Care is made to restore dry, thirsty skin, to heal dryness, and keep skin feeling smooth and healthy for 12 hours straight. So with Vaseline Intensive Care, there's never a dry moment. Heal your dry skin healthy with Vaseline Intensive Care.
Friday, the Amish, mysterious and removed from the modern world. But is there a secret element outsiders never see?
You're not free to make your own life, and that is bondage.
Disturbing Tales, 2020, ABC, Friday.
From the creator of Chicago Hope and Picket Fences comes the next generation of courtroom drama.
All rise. Doing what's right by the book doesn't always work. Anybody here who didn't do it?
You get them off just the same as I do, but I don't have as much fun.
The Practice, premiering 1 week from Tuesday on ABC.
Primetime continues. Once again from New York, Diane Sawyer.
We return now to Mark Fuhrman and something else we've not heard about before. For a minute in the trial, everyone thought the murder weapon might be that stiletto in the envelope, but that was quickly ruled out. Fuhrman has a theory about the knife, until now, all his own. To this day, it remains one of the most haunting questions. What was the murder weapon? The coroner at the first trial speculated that the knife must have been fairly long.
If somebody was looking for a knife, it would be a 6-inch long blade.
But while the specialists came and went, Fuhrman at home in Idaho says he was stunned that there was something no one was talking about. Something he says he saw in O.J. Simpson's bathroom just hours after the murder. A knife box.
An open knife box with no knife in the area, an inletted area inside the box that holds a knife, one of the larger Swiss Army knives.
Whom did you tell about this? Did you run downstairs and say, "You won't believe what we found up here"?
And I told detectives that were searching the master bedroom that there was a package, and a knife box on the bathtub.
Detectives working for Lang and Van Adder.
To this day, you don't know if Phil Van Adder, the homicide detective there, ever saw this box.
I do not know.
I never saw the empty knife box.
I was just finding out about an empty knife box and blood on a light switch and all this stuff 2 years later.
Lang and Van Adder say they had put their detective Bert Looper in charge of the search of Rockingham. So we contacted Looper, who said he did find some small Swiss Army knives in Simpson's vanity, and even saw some empty boxes on the tub, but concluded they were knick-knack boxes. Not so, says Brad Roberts.
It had that Red Cross logo of the Swiss Army knife on it. The box was empty.
And there's no question one of the knives was missing.
Yes, there was no question about that.
Fuhrman says that box may have held the murder weapon, and Van Adder's robbery homicide team simply missed it.
You mean it just disappeared?
I don't know what happened to it, but if you were Simpson and you came home that night and your attorneys were there and you saw that on the bathtub, would you admit it was ever there? We're not going to ever see that box again.
You were talking about a knife this size, right?
A pocket knife with a 3.5-inch locking blade. Just 3.5 inches?
Yes.
How could it have made those kinds of wounds?
There were 30 wounds on both victims. One nearly decapitated Nicole Brown Simpson. It's true that most of the other wounds were no deeper than 3.5 inches, but 2 of them, both on Ron Goldman, were deeper. A stab wound in the chest that is 4 inches deep. A stab wound in his side that is 5.5 inches deep.
How he comes up with the 3.5-inch blade is beyond me.
Now, looking at that knife, you can say, well, that blade won't cause a wound 5.5 inches deep.
Yes.
No, that's incorrect.
Fuhrman says he studied the autopsy reports and got on the phone with experts. He learned, he says, that the wound in the side is in soft tissue, and the thrust of a knife can compress it much like a punch in the stomach would, creating a longer wound. But we decided to check Fuhrman's theory with this man, Dr. Werner Spitz, who wrote the definitive textbook on wounds in criminal investigations. He was also an expert witness for the plaintiffs in the O.J. Simpson civil trial. Spitz says the 3.5-inch blade theory makes sense.
This army knife could easily account for the wounds on both people.
And he says Fuhrman is right about the 5.5-inch soft tissue wound on Ron Goldman's side.
There's compression.
As for the 4-inch chest wound, Spitz says the length of a wound created when your lungs are not full of air will increase if you take a breath and expand the chest.
All these things change the length of the wound track so that
A 3.5-inch blade could easily make a 4-inch, 5-inch, 5.5-inch wound track, without any doubt.
Primetime also called 3 other forensic experts, and all of them agreed that a 3.5-inch blade can make wounds 2 inches deeper than that. But Spitz did have one problem with Fuhrman's theory. The blade Fuhrman talked about with us has a smooth edge.
It is my opinion that a serrated blade was used.
Spitz says there's a wound on Ron Goldman's face that would only come from a serrated blade. Here's an example of such a wound in his textbook. So we showed Dr. Spitz something we discovered. On our locking Swiss Army knife, there is another 3.5-inch blade, serrated.
This knife is consistent with Ron Goldman's wounds.
He used the blade to scrape his own arm.
These serrations are the duplicate of what Ron Goldman had on his right cheek.
As a further check, Primetime asked another expert, Dr. Michael Graham, chief medical examiner for St. Louis, Missouri, to measure the width between the parallel lines, the cuts on Ron Goldman's right cheek in this photo. We then asked him to compare those markings to the teeth on the serrated blade of the Swiss Army knife. He told us that when he aligned them both to scale, the wounds and the knife match.
The finer lines match a wound created by the teeth on both sides of the blade scraping the skin.
Which means the boxes Fuhrman says he saw may have been a major clue. Fuhrman showed us something that he says has become a kind of symbol of the botched investigation to him. An LAPD photograph of Simpson's bathroom just hours after the murders. Although blurry, a close-up seems to show some boxes sitting just where he described, before, he says, the Lang and Van Adder team let them disappear.
How do we know it existed?
Brad Roberts saw that too. He stood right next to me.
Is that the way you remember them?
Yes. Yes.
But whatever Lang and Van Adder's role, it was still Mark Fuhrman who tossed that hand grenade into the trial. The tapes with all the racial epithets on them, which allowed the defense to argue that he had motive to plant the glove.
I'm going to ask you one more time. Did you plant that glove?
Absolutely not.
Fuhrman says, why would he conspire to plant evidence against an innocent man if he made notes about the signature of the real killer, that fingerprint?
Because then it would show how silly of Mark Fuhrman. Supposedly we're saying he plants evidence, and yet he's given us a piece of evidence that could lead to the actual suspect. It just doesn't make any sense.
Did you ever have a flicker of doubt, a moment of wondering if maybe indeed he could have planted that glove?
Never. It was virtually impossible.
But virtually? I mean,
absolutely impossible. Without a doubt, impossible.
Why? He was 15 minutes back there with the glove at Rockingham and nobody else was around.
But he was also never alone at Bundy, where everybody saw one and one only glove.
But what about the defense claim he had a racial motivation?
Had you ever heard him use language like you heard on the tape?
No. That was the first time I'd ever heard that. I was surprised. I was very surprised, like everyone. He had a big following of black friends on this department.
In his book, Murder in Brentwood, Fuhrman blames the prosecutors Marcia Clark and Chris Darden for not trying to repair the damage when the Fuhrman tapes blew up the case. He says they were too caught up in their own celebrity and too frightened by racial politics.
Should such a person be a police officer? No. In fact, do we wish there were no such person on the planet? Yes.
Is that professional? I think they were still involved in a murder case. This wasn't a family dispute.
Well, presumably they didn't do it for personal reasons. They did it because they thought they had to bail on you in order to win.
Well, what would have been the harm to at least talk to me and see what I had to say? If they would have had me talk to them and said, we hate you, but we're prosecutors and we have a case. What are we going to do about this? I can swallow that. I would have done everything that they would have wanted.
But again, compared to the time bomb you handed her, given those tapes and the repercussions
tapes, right,
of those tapes,
right,
and the time bomb that they were, and
absolutely,
the explosion that they were,
I agree.
Whose mistake was the worst here? Did Marcia Clark and Chris Darden blow the case? Or did you?
Well, did you see Marcia Clark or Chris Darden doing any direct or cross-examination of me after the tapes came out?
So you're saying if you had been discredited, they had an alternative?
Wasn't I discredited? Man, I repeatedly asked her to use Brad Roberts. Let's bring Brad in. He could corroborate this. He could corroborate this. He could corroborate this. No.
She just said no?
No, we don't need Brad. I was never given a reason.
I could have corroborated a great deal of everything that he did. A lot of the timelines, I think I could have eliminated a lot of the conspiracy theory about the blood evidence being planted at later times during the day.
Why weren't you called to testify?
I'm still wondering. I don't know. I was never interviewed by anyone from the district attorney's office.
Never interviewed?
I was never interviewed.
And even today, though Roberts got LAPD permission to speak with us.
Do you think everyone would have preferred you not come?
Yes.
Why?
Well, they all seem to think that I probably have something to lose and nothing to gain by doing this. What I have to lose, I haven't been able to get out of anyone.
What do you have to gain?
I'm helping a friend out explain the truth.
Chris Darden and Marcia Clark would not comment for this report. And Langan Benatters regrets?
I'm sorry I didn't send Mark Fuhrman home the minute I met him. That's what I'm really sorry about.
We wish we could have impounded the whole house. And we can talk about this 2.5 years later. If ifs and buts were candy and nuts, what a Merry Christmas we'd have.
At the end of the first trial, Mark Fuhrman says he was the only person to be vilified, while he had seen others botch their work and even lie. It's a small footnote to Fuhrman's turbulent history, but this is Laura Hart McKinney, the screenwriter who made those tapes of Fuhrman, the ones in which he says he's inventing racist dialogue. Fuhrman says because McKinney was going to testify under oath,
First name Laura.
He had to confess to his wife something he'd omitted before. That earlier, before he was married, he'd had a romance with McKinney.
That was difficult because I didn't want to pile anything more on her.
The irony is, he confessed it for naught.
Your relationship in 1985 with Mark Fuhrman, was it only professional?
It was a it was a business relationship. He was a technical advisor for the screenplay.
And that is it?
Yes.
Funny, isn't it?
County of Los Angeles.
Because of those tapes, Mark Fuhrman pled no contest to perjury. He says he knows he has to continue to fight to prove he's not what everyone thought.
Do you get the feeling, though, that people are still uneasy about what kind of racist heart might still lie in there?
I don't sense it, and by God, I'm looking for it.
And the man who once said detective work was his life says today he's reconciled to a future in which he'll never be a cop again. A footnote now. At the time of the murders, O.J. Simpson was on the board of directors of the company that manufactures Swiss Army knives. The company confirmed to us that Simpson has bought Swiss Army knives, but could not confirm which model, saying only there's no record that he bought a locked blade. You may remember, though, there was a limousine driver who allegedly said that Simpson returned from a meeting of the board 4 days before the murders with a bag full of knives, and while riding in the back seat, flashed one of them, saying, "You could really hurt someone with this. You could even kill someone with this." Simpson, as you know, has always maintained his innocence.
Wouldn't you just adore this penthouse view? In a moment, John Stossel finds some top-flight real estate at bargain basement prices. But first, it's the most popular prescription drug for women. But with so much at stake, should you be taking hormones?
Doctors will say, take your estrogen, reduce your risk of heart attack. We haven't proven it reduces the risk of heart attack.
Dr. Nancy Snyderman weighs the pros and cons when Primetime continues.
LensCrafters has these new lightweight titanium P frames from Luxottica. They weigh about 40% less than other metal frames. They're fashionable, comfortable. Look at the difference. Wow. I love seeing them smile when that happens.
LensCrafters, helping people see better 1 hour at a time. Can MasterCard predict the future? Well, someday a computer chip in your MasterCard will be able to recognize your finger pattern, making your personal ID truly personal and your MasterCard even more secure. MasterCard, it's smart money.
Your all-stars, performing all-star feats.
They're the reason we make Ford Windstar with over 40 standard safety features. In fact, Windstar is the only minivan to earn 5 stars, the highest possible rating in government crash tests. A pretty spectacular feat in itself. Don't your all-stars deserve Ford Windstar? Created for the most important people in the world.
This is the sound of small businesses doing more business with Fridays free. They're doing more because thanks to Sprint, all their long distance on Fridays is free. While the rest of the week, they're still getting Sprint's low flat rates. Even better, call now and get Fridays free until the year 2000 with no term commitment. Call 1-800-598-5000 for Fridays free. Only from Sprint Business.
Last week, we brought you a special edition of Primetime, Hidden Cameras, Hard Choices, and we asked you to write with your comments. We received over 1,300 letters and emails, one of the largest responses we've ever had. And while most of them supported the use of hidden camera and the work we did on the Food Lion report, not everyone agreed. Ken Schaub of Mount Pleasant, South Carolina argued, "Why should I trust the evidence the reporters produced? After all, they lied to get hired, and they might be lying about what they found." And others found our broadcast a mere defense of our 1992 report. "The lady doth protest too much," said one, quoting Shakespeare. However, Dave Cothran of Sandy, Utah, wrote a letter reflecting what most of you said to us. "I know of no other more objective means of uncovering a story than the unflinching, unbiased eye of the video camera. Keep the cameras rolling." Primetime will return after these messages from our ABC stations.
22 News Now.
I'm Tiffany Eddy.
News that matters.
Touchdown, 16
To your friends.
Stand by, everybody.
To your community.
Republicans in the Vermont House.
To your business.
News, this is Ted.
To you. News that matters.
That features like a couple of days high pressure.
And Q.
Rich Von Olin, part of the home team. 22 News Now.
What's new? The Chrysler Town & Country. It takes the idea of luxury to a whole new dimension. At Chrysler in Plymouth, New England, we'll show you what's new.
Darlene turns sweet 60.
You really ought to do something special for her. You mean passing her big head through my loins wasn't enough?
And Roseanne's got a big surprise.
She's planning to throw me some sort of white trash debutante ball.
Hair up would be nice. But Darlene finds it hard to swallow.
Well, maybe I'll get lucky and choke on my free meal at Lenny's.
Denny's. On the next, Roseanne.
Roseanne, weeknights at 11:05 on WVNY.
Coming up tonight on 22 News Now at 11, a Heinsberg cheese manufacturer announces more cuts in its workforce. More details emerge on how Vermont lawmakers plan to fund state education.
And tonight in weather, some rain and snow showers overnight, but tomorrow should be a really nice day. We'll tell you about it tonight.
And a battle to keep Vermont free of billboards. I'm Tiffany Eddy. Join Rich and me for these stories and more coming up tonight on 22 News Now at 11.
MASH, weeknights at 7 and 7:30 on WVNY.
Primetime continues. Now from Washington, Sam Donaldson.
The numbers are astonishing. There are 48 million women in the United States who have undergone menopause, and by the year 2000, the number of women over the age of 45 will nearly double. Many will be given a prescription for estrogen replacement. Just today, the latest in a long line of studies suggested that taking estrogen may help prevent major illnesses later in life. But is anyone talking about the possible risks? Dr. Nancy Snyderman found a leader in women's health who is raising some serious questions.
You're looking at the #1 most prescribed drug in America, the hormone estrogen in the form of a pill called Premarin. 44 million prescriptions were sold to menopausal and postmenopausal women last year.
It's an experiment. We don't know yet what the long-term effects of taking these hormones are.
We don't know what the benefits are.
Dr. Susan Love is a breast surgeon who has made a name for herself speaking out against the way the medical establishment treats women. She was among the first to decry the standard practice of radical mastectomy for breast cancer. And she was a driving force behind politicizing breast cancer to raise awareness and funding.
We're going to eliminate breast cancer, and we're not going to let it go on to another generation. Thank you.
So this is all the stuff you went through for the book?
Absolutely.
Last year, she stepped down as head of UCLA's breast center, in part to write a book about estrogen and other alternatives for menopause.
Is estrogen prescribed too often? Absolutely. I think that the current trend right now is, unless you have a compelling reason not to, you should be on hormones for the rest of your life after 50. And I think it should be the absolute opposite.
A woman's body stops producing estrogen at menopause. Estrogen pills, creams, and patches are considered safe in the short term for symptoms like mood swings, hot flashes, and vaginal dryness.
After menopause, you can lose up to 25% of the bone in your hip, spine, and wrist without even knowing it.
New research suggests that long-term use of hormones may help prevent osteoporosis, heart disease, maybe even Alzheimer's. It's a tantalizing idea, a drug that may actually stave off some of the effects of aging.
If they can get every postmenopausal baby boomer on hormones for 30 years, can you imagine how much you can make?
Good business, Love says, but is it good medicine?
I think people are seeing a big market, and all of a sudden menopause is the newest disease, and we're calling it estrogen deficiency disease. Well, first of all, we're not supposed to have estrogen our whole lives. Menopause is programmed in. You can't tell me that half of the population have a disease.
These patients will be helped or relieved by psychotherapy, together with sedatives and other supplementary medication when necessary.
Doctors prescribed tranquilizers back in my mother's day when menopause was called the change. Ads like these showed menopausal women in desperate straits, and later, in combination with estrogen, suggested treatment for the symptoms that bothered him most. In 1966, a revolutionary bestseller called Feminine Forever encouraged women to take estrogen to escape the horror of living decay. More recently, ads for hormones showed the estrogen-deficient woman, the needless martyr, the shape of things to come. And now the popular press calls it the pill that keeps women young.
I mean, what is it saying about women's bodies? What is it saying? It's saying that there's something wrong with them, and we've got to change them, shape them, alter them. And I think that's very scary, this notion that we have to put everybody on drugs for the next 30 years. There's something crazy about that.
So when the doctors of America see this segment and go, there she goes again, battling her way against the establishment.
Indeed. But, you know, I sort of feel like my role in life is to be a truth teller. And I think that women deserve to know. I don't know what the answers are. It may turn out that hormones are great for prevention. We'll know that in another 10 or 15 years. We don't know now.
But try telling that to a group of women who can attest that the symptoms of menopause are real.
I was feeling dejected and didn't fit in, and just weeping at the least little thing, was crying all the time, and feeling not very good about myself, not very good at all. But then when I went on the patch, that all changed.
Phyllis Williams says taking estrogen makes her feel better.
I had these hot flashes. I would go and swim 1.5 miles and come in and then dry my hair with a hot hair dryer and be reduced to a puddle.
Marcia Dyer-Crapo, like Phyllis, is convinced that staying on estrogen long-term is a good idea.
My conclusions are that the protection from heart disease is a big one, and osteoporosis. To me, the benefits outweigh anything negative.
Do you guys believe the research that is out there?
It's contradictory.
Yeah, there's a lot of contradictory research. I still am undecided. The breast cancer is a very scary issue for me.
That's what concerns Susan Love, who worries that women might be trading heart disease and osteoporosis in their 80s for breast cancer at 65. The few long-term studies done on estrogen and breast cancer are conflicting, but the largest study showed a 46% increase after more than 10 years.
I do think that there is an increased risk.
How much of a risk?
It's probably, at least the best we can tell now, is between 30 and 50%. However, we're probably underestimating it.
For a group of 100 women 50 years old,
2.5 normally develop breast cancer by the age of 60. A 30% increase translates into 3.3 women with breast cancer. By age 70, that increase would be from 5.7 to 7.4 women. And over the rest of their lives, the increase would be from 11.4 to 14.8.
That's a slight increase in risk. Most epidemiologists don't call that significant, but we have to give that as the risk factor.
Dr. Wolf Udian is Director of Obstetrics and Gynecology at University Hospitals of Cleveland and founder of the North American Menopause Society.
There's a distinct relationship between the menopause and bone loss.
He says the data on breast cancer are inconclusive, but the potential benefits are great.
We could anticipate that about a third to a half of heart attacks in women could be prevented.
While most women fear breast cancer, heart disease kills 10 times more women over the age of 55.
Doctors will say, take your estrogen, reduce your risk of heart attack.
We haven't proven it reduces the risk of heart attack. The studies on heart disease are what we call observational studies, which means they took women who were on hormones and they compared them to women who weren't on hormones. The women on hormones had less heart disease, but they also were higher socioeconomic level, were more likely to exercise, more likely to see a doctor, more likely to treat their high blood pressure and their high cholesterol than the women who weren't. And so until you have a study that has the same number of couch potatoes in each group, you're not going to know whether it's the estrogen that's doing it or whether it's their lifestyle that's doing it.
Udian has read the studies too, including laboratory studies showing estrogen reduces cholesterol and says lifestyle cannot be the only explanation.
I don't know almost any other area of medicine where study after study after study in different parts of the country, in different populations, in different parts of the world, keep coming back and they keep showing a 30 to 50% protection rate.
The data on osteoporosis are compelling. 1 in 4 women will get it. And on average, a woman will lose 10 to 15% of her bone mass in the first 5 years after menopause. The difference between normal and osteoporotic bone shown here is that weakened bone can cause fractures later in life. Estrogen will halt that loss, but only for as long as you're taking the drug.
Osteoporosis. Data says, take estrogen, you have stronger bones.
Absolutely. However, are you going to take a drug for 30 years to prevent something that might happen when you're in your 80s? I think rather than going straight to drugs, first look at lifestyle and look at how you can live a healthier lifestyle. And then, if you need it, you can add something else like drugs. But there are alternatives to hormones for osteoporosis as well.
We're always behind the 8 ball with studies. We will never have a definitive study. But does that mean we should not treat? We don't have a definitive study on appendectomy. Does that mean we should leave everybody with an inflamed appendix and not do surgery? That's obviously patently ridiculous.
I just need you to relax and breathe normally.
Definitive answers may finally come out of the Women's Health Initiative, the largest and most comprehensive study to date looking at hormone replacement therapy.
I would like to ask you a few questions that require concentration and memory.
One area of study is memory. Preliminary studies have shown that estrogen might reduce the risk of Alzheimer's disease, but it's too soon to tell.
This lady is going to be randomized to hormone replacement therapy and also WIMS.
Final results won't be in until the year 2005.
Well, these are soy nuts, and so they're high in soy content, and
They're good.
They're not bad.
Until then, it's not an either-or choice for women. Diet and exercise also play their roles.
You have a bowl of this for breakfast, and that's equal to a Premarin pill.
That's because soy products like these contain plant estrogens. Love says they may have the same beneficial effects and no harmful side effects. The problem is knowing how much estrogen is actually in a given product.
Is this how you're going to attack menopause?
Mm-hmm. Running, eating better. Yeah, I'm going to try to do it by lifestyle.
Come on, Brown. Good dog.
You know, if I need to...